We need specialisation. It's important for successful organisations, but it may mean that we miss the impact that we're having on others and on the wider system. So how can we step back and look at this wider system? Peter, I think you're going to share a story that shows how that was possible.
Yeah, I take your point, Jane, that we are successful because of specialisation. So we want that. We want people who really know how to do specialised jobs. And stepping back and looking at the whole, which is a kind of system where everybody's impacting everybody else, can be very beneficial. I have a lot of stories. This one is from the UK, and it's in the criminal justice system. It's from a time when the government started to get interested in resettlement. How do prisoners who come out of prison find themselves in the community and able to contribute there, rather than reoffending and going back into prison? The measures they came up with were starting measures, KPIs they called them, were quite basic, I thought. I remember talking with you about it and saying, we could have a far better context to think about this than what percentage of prisoners have a home to go to. They're important KPIs, there's no doubt about it, but there wasn't a context to think about the whole situation. As I remember it, Jane, you were working in drug treatment, had worked in drug treatment in 3 prisons.
I had been recently working across a cluster of prisons as the manager of the drug treatment service.
And that was Blakenhurst Prison, which was for men.
Brock Hill Prison, which was a women's prison. And then Hewell Grange, which was an open prison for men, which meant that they could come and go on day release, work outside the prison.
They'd be in prison at night, but during the day they could go to work to help the transition. So this was a pretty good mix. And we got all of them interested in having a day event where we could display the whole system, I guess.
Yeah, and think together about this question about how to improve resettlement.
So we made a graphic, a drawing. We kind of mapped the system. And thinking about it, we realized that the government agencies like the police and courts and so on are involved in the earlier part of the journey of the prisoner through the system.
Yes.
The middle part is where people are imprisoned. And beyond that is when people come out of prison and move into the community. So I thought, well, let's track all that. And then, of course, there are all sorts of agencies who are endeavoring to help with the situation. Drug treatment, you mentioned, but housing and all sorts of things. And there's the whole public attitude, the media, the victim support, and all sorts of families and all sorts of people who are trying to influence the thing in different ways.
And often not thought of as even being part of the system.
Are they all aware of each other? Well, specialisation tends to lead them not to be. Like, this is your job. Let other people do their job. Now, this is what I need you to do. So we made our graphic. It tried to get representation from every part of the system. And we ended up, there was a training centre just outside Blakenhurst Prison that they offered we might use for free.
Yes.
And we ended up with about 45 people, probably.
Yeah, for the day.
And we designed a day which had 4 parts. The first part was to explore what happens during arrest and conviction. The second part was to explore what happens in prison. And the third part was to explore what happens when you come out of prison into the community and try to establish yourself there. And the fourth part was a reflection on the whole journey and on the day we had together. We had quite a bit of experience in dialogue, so we made 2 concentric circles. And the way we introduced it to people, those on the inner circle were the ones who were most involved in that part of the day, did most of the talking. Those on the outside had a chance to sit back and look at the whole system and see what was happening, which was what we intended. We had not only all the representation of all the agencies, we had quite a few prisoners involved. We had some prisoners who were still in prison.
We did, and they were given permission to come. From the women's prison, they came with prison officers supervising them. From the open prison, they were allowed to come across with a permission slip on their own.
So there were women I met that day who came with a an officer
Yeah.
who was in the middle of their sentence, had never been out of the prison apart from walking into this conference and going back.
Yeah.
So it was very live and immediate kind of situation. Their prisoners had been right through these very prisons and were now settled in the community. So we had successes, failures, people working on it and so on. And in the middle of our image, we had what we call the gap. There's a transition needed for a person not to reoffend.
Yeah.
And that's what we were trying to highlight.
Exploring. Yeah. And that it's bigger than you might imagine.
So as we began, the first part was about the arrest and conviction. We had magistrates there who sentenced people, police who arrest them. We had prisoners who had been arrested. And it was surprisingly provocative kind of dialogue.
Yeah.
This wasn't a philosophical conversation. This was people from either side of very difficult situations.
Yeah.
And the one prisoner eventually, very angry, let everybody know how much he hated the police. They had come to his apartment early morning, probably 5 a.m. or something, knocked down his front door, pulled people out of bed, arrested him, in the process pushed his grandmother up against the wall and held her there while they were working out who was there and what was happening. And he said, who would trust people like that?
Mm-hmm.
Like, do you think I'd ever go to the police?
Yeah.
And of course, there were policemen sitting in that inner circle
What was their
as well.
story?
They were not going to hold back. Like one of them, do you know what happened to me when I went to arrest somebody? Somebody fired a double-barrel shotgun through the door. This is just my job. I got to do my job. Like, what do you think? How do you think I'm going to do this? And that kind of, neither had seen it from the other's point of view. They both heard each other quite strongly, actually. It was quite...
yeah, because they'd never had the opportunity to have that conversation together. Normally when they meet, it's in the middle of being arrested or being questioned, or so they would never have had a forum like that. No.
So we went into the second part, and now we had prisoners and prison staff in the inner circle, probation staff, some psychologist or whatever, and others on the outside. So then the police and courts and so on are listening to what it's like in prison, which they may know very little about.
Yeah.
And we're warmed up people. So the warm-up question, I think, for that grouping was, what was your first day like in prison?
Uh-huh.
And for the staff, what was your first day like when you walked into the prison? You'd never been in before, what was it like? And for offenders, prisoners, what was it like the first day? So we're kind of evoking the experience, and we've got the real people, and off we go with our conversation.
Yeah.
And there were plenty of views about how helpful and how unhelpful the staff were to people in prison.
Yes.
That they didn't realize the kind of challenges that a prisoner had, and prisoners not realizing the kind of challenges that staff had. So there was a lot of, I didn't know that, and a lot of forceful conversation going on, but a lot of learning going on.
And just to say, a huge amount of insight for the people sitting around the outside, for the police. You kind of expect that they know everything that's going on, but they have no idea. So there was a lot of insight for them as well who were listening.
Then the release.
Yeah.
And then we had prisoners who come out of prison along with people who work with them in the community, people who provide housing and treatment and employment support and so on. It became apparent, more so than I'd realized before, that coming out of prison is a crisis. Going into prison is a crisis, like what's going to happen to my girlfriend, to my apartment, to my cat or my dog, but coming out is a crisis. And often the gap isn't crossed right in the very first day. Never actually get to accommodation that's provided and end up fairly quickly back in prison. Quite a few high repeat offenders in that kind of situation.
Yeah.
So looking at the skills involved in helping somebody to resettle were very interesting.
If my memory serves me right, the question we used in that part was if your son, daughter, or a close member of your family or close friend was in prison, what would you hope for them when they came out? Because the government KPIs were all about data, it's about numbers. So that question personalised the exploration about that experience of re-entry.
experience and the emotions involved were not really covered in any KPI that I saw at that time.
Yeah.
And then finally, we had the overall fourth part, the reflection on that journey from arrest and sentencing and imprisonment and coming out. What's that journey like for everyone? And also on the day. And many people said, well, I've never been in a group of this diversity where we're all involved in the same thing. And I never really knew what was involved. I didn't understand what happened in prison or when we came out or who was doing what, really. And I have some influence. And the magistrate was clearly, there's at least one magistrate there, clearly was unaware of what conditions are like in prison, although every day he sent people to prison.
Yeah.
And prisoners said, please come to the prison and have a look and see what it's like. His response was, no way would I go into a prison. I'm not interested at all.
Yeah.
And then you realize not only are people having an impact, but they may not want to understand and know about the system. And that's the kind of work that's required systemically for the criminal justice system to work. And it was a kind of landmark in, I guess, another 20 years of prison work we did. It really marked a systemic understanding of the situation.
It really did. Thank you. I have one postscript that has come to my mind as you were telling the story. We had a couple of criminologists came as well.
Yes, that's right.
And of course, they're the people who write about the system all the time and kind of make, in a way, judgments, assessments, and recommendations. And they were going to write up the event. And we pushed back against their write-up because they took a lot of the emotion out of it. There was something in that experience, not just talking about, but being very present in the live experience, kind of evoked it in the room. And that was all taken out in the way it was written up by the criminologists. And that felt like a real loss. It felt like you kind of lost some kind of visceral understanding by doing that. So we kind of pushed back and rewrote some parts, which didn't make us very popular, but I think it was important. And I think that's an important part of the dialogic approach as well, brings up the real experience.
The scrambled thinking that leads somebody to be violent or offend is really based on scrambled emotions. And to remove the scrambled emotions and imagine you can deal with the situation is missing a large part of the point as you're making it, I think.
Really interesting bit of work from our archive. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane.